Good morning. I don't want to trip on that. A number of years ago, before I was married and had 3 children, I was coming back to Auckland in a car with my father and my brother, and we were coming back from Warkworth. And on the way back to Warkworth, in my brother's car, he had an SUV, one of those trucky kind of things, a heavy kind of thing, kind of slow. We were winding up the roads, and we saw, on the other side of the road, a police car coming around the corner. And that was like, whoa! Now, with the story, just relax. No one gets hurt in my story. No one dies. No cars get hurt. No cats get run over. But the cars in front of us immediately slowed down real quickly. And my brother slowed down really quickly too. And of course, my brother just stopped within about that far in front of the car before us. It was like, phew. Now, the police car, as we were doing this, my father said, and he was in the back seat, he said to us, "Watch out for the car behind you. Watch out for the car behind you." Now, in our immaturity, me and my brother, we were looking at the car in front of us because that was the problem. But of course, we stopped. And as we stopped, the car behind us whacked into us, and we whacked into the car in front of us. And we had a car pile of about 5 cars. Now, after this, the police officer managed to get control, came back on the right side of the road, and then kept going up north. Didn't even stop for us. We got out of our car, we looked at the car in front of us, and the car in front of us had a bent chassis. They opened their car doors, and they couldn't shut it. And I found that really interesting. Ever seen a car that's bent and you can't shut the doors? Our car was completely fine. It was safe. We could drive home. But I guess the most interesting thing for me was that my dad was saying, "Watch out, the car behind you." And I reflected on this. He was providing us with information. He was providing us with his wisdom. He knew what was going to happen. He was looking at what was going to happen. And so he provided it for us. In reflection, since I've been driving a car all those years, I've always had that piece of information in my head. And now I kind of like tap the brakes a little bit or move to the side if something goes wrong. And likewise, our Heavenly Father, He can see things that are going to come in the future. And He can provide us with wisdom and insight at a greater level than my Father can. My earthly father did not fall asleep in the back seat. He was watching, I guess because he has 2 young sons, but he was watching what was going on, and he saw it and he provided it. Just like our Heavenly Father, He's not asleep. Our God is actively involved in our world. He's part of us. He's part of this community. And when He sees things in advance, He can provide help. Now, He's a lot stronger than my father. He's got omniscience, omnipresence. He's got abilities beyond my father. Now, this work of God we call, in helping us, is called the providence of God. And I have a quote up there by Robert, and it's quite a good quote explaining this theological term. The theological term is described this way: it's the continuous ongoing forth of God's power, whereby He causes all features of the created universe to fulfill the design for which He created them for. And he goes on just a little bit more, which is helpful. Creation explains how things happen to be in a world at all. Preservation explains why it still exists, and providence explains how it would develop towards God's eternal plan and His goal. And so as we go through the book of Esther in our series, we're going to see this huge theme about the providence of God, God's continual involvement in earth to achieve His purposes, His outcomes. Now, there are 3 initial questions I just want to talk about first. The first one is this. What was this is our theme, for such a time as this. What is this theme that we're going through for such a time as this? Well, the people of God were going towards destruction. There was going to be a situation which would destroy them. And God could see this. God could see that this is going to happen. Haman's goal was to get rid of all the Jewish people, to annihilate, to cause genocide to this whole nation. And so God in His providence, He could see what was going to happen, and He acted on behalf. The second question is this, is how did this deliverance happen? Now, this deliverance happened through God. He provided people in the right place at the right time to do this. Now, there are 2 types of God's providence. There's the one where He does dramatic miracles, something supernatural, and the other one where He does timing and just the right person at the right place. So for the book of Exodus, right, you see both. In Exodus, you see like the 10 plagues and other miracles. God dramatically does something amazingly special. You know, He turns the world into darkness, or He does some kind of spectacular direct miracle. But also in the book of Moses, you see that God does these lovely, timely, just the right time kind of things. Moses' parents were godly. They did not kill the child. Moses' sister was godly. She protected Moses. She said to the Pharaoh's daughter, "Hey, would you like me to get a nurse for you to look after this child?" She was brave. Pharaoh's daughter had a heart for little Moses and looked after him. And so we can see the hand of God looking after Moses in this provisions of God. And so you see it's both direct and indirect. Now this concept of God's provision for us comes from Genesis 22 verse 8. And this is the classic story of Abraham with his son Isaac. He's told to take his son and sacrifice him. And he goes up on the hill, and his son goes, "Dad, the wood's here, we've got Netflix, we've got the knife, but, where is the lamb? Where's the sacrifice?" And he says, "Don't worry, God will provide." And sure enough, God says, "Don't kill your son," and provides a ram that's caught in the bush. And of course, Abraham says, God has provided. This word provide is the idea in the Hebrew of see. It's translated provide for us, which is very helpful, but the actual original word is to see. When God sees, he provides. It's kind of like when you play soccer and your friend says, "Hey, there's a guy over there," and you go, "Yes, I see him, I see him." When you say you see him, what you're saying is, "I'll watch out for him, I'll cover him." Right? You say, "I see him." And God sees what's going on, and God responds. So this is how God responds through people. So, my earthly father in the backseat of the car wasn't asleep like God. He could see what was happening, and so he responded with the provision of wisdom. Our Heavenly Father also sees that there's going to be a day of destruction coming along, and he provides, through his amazing abilities, help. Now, my earthly father did not cause that police officer to drive on the wrong side of the road. Do we have any police officers? Don't put your hand up. In my last church, we had 3, so I had to always be careful. But my father did not cause the police officer to go on the wrong side of the road. The police officer might not have had the right training. He might not have had the skill level that he required for his job. Maybe he was greedy. Maybe he wanted to get there first so he could get a promotion, so he could look good to his boss. Maybe he was jealous of the other guys. If he could get there first before the other guy, then he would have the credit as well. Now, we found out that they were off to a drug bust. That's why I didn't stop. They were all just standing on this drug bust up north. Things haven't really changed up north, have they? Moving on. So whether this was out of just a mistake by the police officer or out of sin, I don't know. But it wasn't caused by my father. My father responded to the situation. And the same here. God can see a day of destruction coming for the people of God. He doesn't cause it. He can see it. And he responds to it, which is cool. The third question is, why would God be interested? I mean, we went through the book of Acts, and many things happened to the people of the book of Acts, right? That wasn't a happy ending. Stephen got stoned. Not drugs, but actually he died, right? He died. God allowed him to die in his wisdom because he could see that this would cause the spread of the gospel. So why wouldn't God just allow these people to die and for God to be blessed and honored through this way? Well, we understand that God is going to bring about deliverance to his people. If these people die, then we're not going to have the Messiah. God's promise came through Abraham that he would make all of us return to God through this promise. We're all going to be children of God one day. You remember that song? Father Abraham has many sons has I can hear you singing already. And I am one of them, and so are you. So God's made this promise in Genesis, right? That he is going to redeem the world through this nation. If this nation is wiped out, then this plan of God is going to be altered. And so God sees the danger and goes, no, this is not going to happen. So I have a summary. It's a bit wordy, but I'll give it to you anyway. And, there's Jesus. That's the best picture of Jesus I could find. So here's my summary of the book we're going through. The providence of God, that's the provision of God, on behalf of his covenant people, you and me, to rescue them from annihilation as a nation, thus keeping his divine plan alive, Genesis 12, for all the nations of the world through faith in Jesus Christ, through the brave, active deliverance work of Esther. This is not passive. We need to be involved in the work of God. It's not turn off and go to sleep. It's actually turn on and be actively involved with God. So, with that in mind, let's jump into this book, understanding this background, this framework of the providence of God. And so we're in chapter 2, and thank you for Natasha for reading the scriptures for us today. And don't clap, it was for God. She lost her glory. So in chapter 2, we're going to read about 3 people. And the first person we're going to see is the king. And 3 journeys. This is the king's journey for a new queen. And in verse 1, we see that the king has calmed down. He's no longer angry. And the king in chapter 1, he throws a big party for 12 months, has all of his empire come and see his glory, as Leighton said, and he's trying to manipulate people, trying to win people's favor so he can expand his kingdom. And he has 180 days. And then after his 180 days, he has another festival of like 7 days at his hometown. And he brings all the people to see his glory. And this time he's very much drunk. He's very much under influence of people at his party. And he calls for his queen, Vashti, to come and to walk around, his trophy wife, to show her beauty, so that he can see that he's a great king, that you should follow him. And of course, she says no. She says no to being a show person. And of course, in Esther 1:12, the king is very angry and burns with anger within inside him. The fire is lit. And so the king seeks advice, and the advice is to have her never come and see the king again and have her to be replaced. And of course, he follows this advice. Now, in chapter 2, which we're in today in our series, we see the king is calmed down. We see that the king is starting to remember his old queen, Vashti. This has been 4 years. And so 4 years later, he's like, what have I done? You can sort of see the regret, sort of see that he's reflecting on this relationship that he had and the decision he made. Now, in this calm state, the officials quickly advise him, hey, look, carry on with your amazing plan. Go into all the kingdom. Practically do this plan that we gave you. Go into all the kingdom, look for a young virgin woman to be your next queen. Have a competition. And of course, the king agrees this. He is pleased by this idea, which is kind of sad, really. The king's choice is actually sad. It's dark. This kingdom was broken. Esther was involved in this broken kingdom. It's a very dark empire. You think of having like 300 concubines for the king's pleasure, under the disguise of a harem. Also, they had eunuchs, castrated men. There's 12 of them mentioned in this book, with heaps of other ones not mentioned by name. Deuteronomy forbids this practice, and yet they practice this. We know that in like the book of Acts that we studied, that the Ethiopian unicorn receives Christ. Even when the world is dark and broken and causes problems to other people, the gospel breaks through. And so for me personally, when I was thinking through the Esther book, I was thinking, this is not a children's story. I don't know. We shouldn't really teach this in Sunday school because this is dark. This is a broken kingdom. I thought this is a Sunday school. No, it's not. This is a hard situation, a tough place to be for a Christian, someone who follows God. And yet God is there amongst the midst of the brokenness. Now, the king's advisors probably realized, wait a minute, if the king's now, after 4 years, reflecting on Esther, on the first queen, Vashti, he might bring her back. This could be bad for us because we advised him to go away from her. So obviously they wanted, very importantly, to get someone new. And of course the king, he accepts it, which is kind of sad. I like what Warren Wiersbe says. He says there's a difference between love and sex. The passion and excitement of the moment is not the same as a lifelong enriching relationship. And this is what the king really needed. It was this long relationship. But he settles, and of course consistent with his darkness of this empire, for the superficial. And so he moves on to it. But once again, God knows this is going to happen, and God uses this for the day of deliverance. He uses this brokenness. He doesn't cause the brokenness of the king, but he's going to use this broken situation. And the classic example of the providence of God would be Joseph. Remember Joseph? He was in that pit. His brothers hated him. His brothers had jealousy for him. He was in that pit. He's going, this is terrible. And yet, later on in his life, he said those classic words, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. You meant it for evil. This is an evil situation, broken situation, but God is going to use it. And so like this story here in Esther. Secondly, we see Esther's journey to being the new queen. And this is a graphic design by an artist of what that kingdom would have looked like. Pretty amazingly big. It's a huge complex. The buildings were huge. The doors were huge. This is the time after Babylon. One of the Babylon castle walls is actually in the British Museum. So if you go to Britain, there's a big wall there. It's hugely high, and you can go and stand beside it. It's beautiful, gold and green, and it's just amazingly big. So this is his castle. And of course, God was going to bring Esther to the king from the poverty. So we learn here in verse 7, you'll see that Esther was raised by her cousin, which is pretty cool. We've got the background, raised by her cousin. And so this it gives us the family details about her. They lived here in this town, which is great. God provided this person at the right place. And then, of course, she had this Jewish background. She was one of the chosen people. And you can see the background has been traced back all the way through to Saul, to the King David. And so I got a little chart here for you. Most likely, this enemy, which is announced in the next chapter, of Haman, goes all the way back to Exodus, where the people of God are traveling, and these people attack the people of God. And then, of course, King Saul also has a problem with these guys as well. One of them claimed to kill Saul, but obviously it didn't kill Saul exactly. And so this historical challenge is going to happen in this book. And God can see this, just like my Father can see what's really going to happen. And God is preparing for this. He's not caught by surprise. Like, oh my gosh, where did that enemy come from? He can see the enemy coming, and he provides for them. They had been carried away. Obviously, they were returning to exile at this point in time, but God had provided them to go back. Now, Esther was beautiful. Kind of like me when I was younger. I was incredibly handsome and gorgeous. Stunning, thank you. Who was that one who said stunning? Wonderful. You deserve a chocolate bar. Stunning. So I was stunning. But this type of beauty that we see was used by God to bring her into the kingdom. Now, beauty throughout history has certain, qualities that are always the same. Like having your ears at about the same level, that's kind of beautiful. If someone has the ear way up, and having a jaw that's kind of symmetrical and eyes, they're all good features. But each culture overlays of those classical kind of ideas of beauty is another idea of beauty as well. For example, in the Old Testament, in the Bible, being overweight was seen as a sign of wealth, a sign of beauty. Now, today we think of being skinny as a sign of beauty, although we're transferring from skinny now to more the sports ideal, right? So I, once again, look beautiful because I'm sporty. So we keep having a change of beauty standards. There's another one there in example from the Old Testament is this, Song of Solomon. In verse 6 it says this, do not gaze at me because I am dark. Or the Message says, do not look down upon me because I am dark. So there's some kind of negativity of being dark. Why? Because the sun has looked upon me. The sun has burnt me. If you're poor in that culture, you worked outside. You were burnt by the sun. You had golden skin. So she said, look, he loves me even though I have this beautiful tan skin. In our culture, we go, tan skin is beautiful. Back in the 90s and the 2000s, when I grew up, having tan skin was beautiful. And of course, I've got this white sort of funny skin that goes red and goes back to being white. So I never quite made the standard of beauty. But I would now, back in Song of Solomon, to be white was a sign of wealth because you were inside, you didn't work, you obviously had money. And so the standard of beauty changes. God provided Esther with the right standard of beauty for her culture at that time. So God is involved not only in the timing, but in the way we look, the culture that we're involved in. So hopefully by now you're starting to see that God's hand is involved. Next we see is Esther's preparation. She gets 12 months of beauty treatment. Verse 8, we see that Esther is collected by the king to be prepared. Now at this stage Esther would have had no choice but to go. The king's orders would have been like unquestionable. Esther does later on challenge the queen, but not at this stage. She keeps quiet. She waits for her opportunity. Verse 9 tells us that Esther won the favor of one of these eunuchs, Haggai. And this eunuch straight away gave her cosmetics, food, and 7 servants. My wife complains that I have my mother. She serves me too much. They have 7 servants to look after her. And she has the best place in the palace. Now, I know what it's like to be in the economy class on a plane or a business class, and there's a big difference. I don't know what it means to have the best place in the palace, whether it had a window or as a corner or as easy to sleep at nighttime. But she was once again provided by God on this journey because God wanted to accomplish what he was going to do. And during this process, she doesn't reveal her nationality. Her cousin tells her to stay quiet. Now, it's not about being racist. It's about the fact that the people of God are hated. Those in this world hate those people who follow God. And so Mordecai was wisely given to Esther, and she followed Esther and said, look, don't make this a big scene at this stage. You're young, just keep it to yourself. We see Jesus telling us in John 15:18. You'll know this verse quite well. John 15:18. If the world, that's the rulers, the empire of this world, hates you, keep in mind they hated me, Jesus, first. If you belong to this world, the systems, the priorities, this world will also love you. If you don't belong to this world, I've read that wrong. If you belong to this world, it will love you. So if you follow its standards. But if you don't belong to this world, it will hate you, just as it hates me, Jesus. So at this point, she keeps quiet. God provides her a wise cousin to guide her through this stage. And then thirdly, we see Esther being selected. Esther in herself is wise. She's not just beautiful, but we see now just the little drips of her wisdom. She submits to Mordecai's instructions, and even the eunuch, she seeks his advice. What should I take to the king? She takes nothing else but what the eunuch says to take. She trusts somebody else. She's showing wisdom. Later on, she's wise with her two parties. She's wise with her timing with the king. So she's selected by the king. Obviously, she's selected not for her wisdom, but for her perceived beauty according to that standard. And Esther has thrown a big party. Now, all of you might think, oh yeah, that's nice. Imagine if we all had a tax break for a week and a big party. Who would be excited? Okay, no one's putting their hands up. Who would like a tax break? Okay, that's better. Okay, everyone gets a tax break and presents and a big party, which is really, really cool. So she would have been popular. She would have been well known. So in this dark situation, Esther gets this opportunity to be ready for God. Now, if you talk to Esther or Joseph and you said, Esther, why are you in this beautiful palace? I don't think she'd say, because I'm going to be used of God. I don't think at that stage she probably knew. She's still got 5 years to go before she's going to get to that point where she's going to make a huge difference for the people of God. But God's providing her with time, 5 years to sit there, to understand what the king's like, so that when she makes her decision, she knows how to respond. She's getting to know all the palace guards, how to throw a party and everything like that. So God has provided for her. Let's move on to the last person, Mordecai. Mordecai's journey to the palace. These are actual real pictures, so don't laugh. So Mordecai is also cool. He's another key support person for Esther. He's at the right place, that little King's Gate, that's where it is there. He's at the right place, at the right day, at the right time, in hearing distance of these two eunuchs who are going to talk about a plot against the king. Now Mordecai had a safe way to communicate to the king. He would go through Esther. If he had gone through somebody else, he might have been outed out. They might have been part of the plot too, and Mordecai would have been killed. If he'd gone through somebody else, they might have stolen the credit. Esther gives the credit back to Mordecai. So 5 years later, when Mordecai just happens to be reading his chronological books at nighttime, he can go back to Mordecai and reward him. A huge coincidence. And so this is, once again, the provision of God we see. Once again, God's timing is involved. Now, hopefully by now, you're starting to see clearly God's hand that's involved. And while the providence of God is not a direct miracle, it here is a miracle of timing and opportunity for God. And firstly, this is recognized by Haman's wife and friends. Now, earlier on in 6:13, they were so excited for Haman to kill Mordecai and the people. But later on, they realized, actually, if God is involved in this, if this is this Jewish man, you're not going to win. It's not going to go good for you. Secondly, it's recognized by Mordecai himself. Esther sort of like dawns on her what she has to do to go to the king. And we see that she's sort of like, oh, well, what am I going to do? And Mordecai says to her these words, if you, Esther, keep quiet, relief and deliverance will arise for another place. There will be somebody else. Mordecai is 100% that God's involved. You can be part of this plan, but if you walk away, God will choose somebody else. And that's where we get the theme of the book. For such a time as this. This is your opportunity in God's providence to be used of God. And then thirdly, we recognize this by seeing the coincidences go to causes by God's hands. And so these coincidences are part of God's plan, and you move on to it. John Walton said this, and I liked it, so I'm going to just read it to you. God's work may be obscure to the skeptics by the disguise of consequences, but the people of God recognize his sovereign hand in the ebbs and flows of history. His name is not mentioned, but his influence is unmistakable. And John Walton would often say that. Very smart guy. So I just want to do a little creative idea, because I know we all learn differently. And so I want to do a little creative idea. Is there someone who would like to get a bar of chocolate, who doesn't mind being up the front with me, being a little bit maybe embarrassed, or doesn't mind talking to me? Is there someone who would come up? Who? You, come on up there. Wonderful. I've got 3 chocolate bars, just in case you don't like one. You like chocolate? Wow, good. Okay, so just tell everyone your name again. Barbara's here. So people online, Barbara's here. And I've got these, you just want to stand up the front here. Got these chocolate bars. So, okay, what I'm going to do. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, so what you have to do, they're on 0? Let's put them on 0. Yeah, they're on 0. They're mixed up. Okay, what you do is you open this padlock, and then I'm going to give you a chocolate bar. But because I'm kind and I'm nice, and I see you have a problem because it's quite difficult to do, I'm going to provide you help. So I want you guys in the audience to think of, this has got 4 numbers. Think of 4 numbers, and then you don't have your glasses. Go get your glasses. Okay, so think of a number in your head, right? This has got 4, and I'm going to ask you to help Barbara provide her with the numbers. Cool. You got your glasses? You can borrow mine. Okay, so put up your hands. Come on, put your hands up. All right, for this gold die. Okay, die. Give us the numbers for this one. There you go. Sorry? Yeah, the numbers. Yep, the number. 2401. Can you stand a little bit forward, please? Sorry. Just so I see you on camera. 2401. Lovely. Well done. Now, no, I don't want to get the chocolate bar just yet. Let's just do another one. Okay. Okay. Here's a nice lock. Let's just mix that up. You can hold that one.
I thought you were going to tie me up with
No. No, they're not tying you up. I'm not going to hurt anyone. I embarrass people, but not. So let's do it again. Everyone think of how many numbers? 4. 4 numbers. Let's see a hand up here. Okay, Annika. 3, 6, 12. 3, 6, 12. 1, 2. Whoa, lovely. Wonderful. What a coincidence. I love this. This is such a great coincidence in life. Isn't this just a coincidence? Okay, let's have another one. This has got 3. Okay, let's have another volunteer. Okay, Colleen. 007. Oh, James Bond number. Okay, 007.
I can't read it.
7. So that's 9. One more left. Cool. Then. Oh, what a coincidence! What an amazing coincidence we have here today, ladies and gentlemen. She's going to get a chocolate bar, and it's all because she's amazing. This is a weird one. Whoa. It starts here. Looks like, wow, this is really weird. It starts here, and it goes across this way. Okay. At the moment, it's QQX11. Let's look for somebody else who can do this. Who's going to put up their hand? Come on, don't be shy. Abby, you're the only one. Abby. PP nothing 0.
Is there a nothing?
I don't know. Oh, yeah, there is a nothing.
PP.
Let's just trust her. PP 0, 0.
I got that right.
PP.
Have I got it in the right place?
Yep.
No, I've got to go down one.
Oh no,
That's right.
That's right. No, that's there. PP.
Is it this bit?
Nothing.
No, it's got to be down one. I
PP.
think.
What was it? PP. PP. No, it's PP. So PP.
Oh, PP.
PP nothing 0.
I should know that.
You should know that one. How does it go? Cool.
PP nothing 0, 0.
Yep.
Got that.
Pull it open. Oh, what a coincidence! What a lovely coincidence. This is such a good coincidence. I love coincidences. All right, here's another little one. Let's involve somebody else. Come on, somebody on this side of the room. Okay, way back there. Jeff, sound test man. 307. This chocolate bar is looking good. 307. Is it the other way around? Oh, no, that's the way, isn't it? Yeah, 307.
This is going to involve eyesight.
No, sorry. Next time, can I have a volunteer who has eyesight? No, you're doing it right.
Driving out of here, this is worrying.
This is worrying me too. Uber.
I can't see that.
Let's see. I help you. Was it? What did you say again?
307.
3. Okay, let's just. 3.
Can't see either. You trust this man and he can't see. The blind.
There you
guy.
go. All right, that's done. Look.
Right.
Okay. What a coincidence! Okay, let's just do this last one. This one's got 1 to 9, then a 0, and you just push them down or up.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's make a really hard one. Let's see who's got a hard one. All right, Toby.
Try
1.
Try
7.
Try 3, 4, 5.
3 on the left-hand side. 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's have a look at that one. You push the little button at the bottom. Oh! What a coincidence! Okay, you get to choose your chocolate bar. Which would you like?
The biggest one.
Wonderful.
I need a break.
Okay. Now, I've got another question for you for another chocolate bar, okay? Do you... No, you can stand here for a second. Do you think that that was a coincidence, or do you think that I saw that you had a problem, and I, in my divine wisdom, wanted you to have help, and so I provided you help, or just as a coincidence?
I think you had a word of knowledge.
A word of not. Okay, you can have a chocolate bar. What would you like? Okay. All right, have a seat then. Okay, great.
It was definitely a coincidence.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay. She thought it was a coincidence, and I think that definition up there is disguised as coincidence. It's actually not a coincidence. When you go back and you look at this text, you know, the queen was required just the right time. Esther was the right age. If she'd been 5 years older, no selection. If she'd been married, no selection. She was beautiful according to standard. She was wise. She won the corner room in the palace for preparation. She had, all these different things in chapter 2. And I've counted like 11 things in chapter 2. And then you go right through the rest of the book. This is not coincidence. This is the hand of God. The hand of God is involved, which is so, so cool. I have another quote by this guy, and he's a really cool guy as well. And he says, talking about this idea that actually the name of God is not mentioned in this book. The 2 books in the Bible, Esther and Song of Solomon, that God is not mentioned in. But we obviously see God's hand in it. And there's sort of this idea that the author actually doesn't want us to be told all the time that God's here. And he says this, perhaps the reader Scripture can get hardened to God's presence in the lives of its characters by the consistent and very obvious references on almost every page. The book of Esther, by its radical difference in this regard, makes the reader sit up, take notice, peer deeply into its pages to detect the presence of God is there or not. And by extension, the author tells us that we must sometimes look for God in our own lives. And so the question I have for us is this. Do you see the hand of God in the book of Esther? Did you see the hand of God in receiving the chocolate? Do you see the hand of God in your life? Now, sometimes at the moment you won't see it. Joseph wouldn't have seen it in the well. Esther wouldn't have seen it when she went to her Mordecai's house when her parents died. Sometimes you don't see it in the moment, but later on you start to see it. I was at Cape Murray for a number of years, and I had a discipleship person each year, and I met with a young man, and we would talk and pray, and I had this young guy, and he was really, really cool, and we'd be very open with each other, and we would talk about, private things. And one day I noticed this beautiful young Christian lady, intelligent, she was super fun, she loved her Bible, she was good, she was very well good looking, she had the full package, she's just lovely. And I said to my young discipleship guy, I said, so have you been praying about this girl that's showing interest in you? And he goes, what girl? And I said, this girl. And he goes, no, that's just a coincidence. And I said, no, it's not. And he said, you're just, making stuff up. You always tease me. And I'm like, no, I do tease you. But, and at that point, there was a guy walking past that was a mutual friend of both of us. And I said to him, hey, do you think such and such likes him? And without a pause, he said, absolutely. Look at the way she always looks at him. And he was like, so he wouldn't believe me for like 2 weeks. And I am sort of a person who likes to tease a little bit, ask my children. And I know it says in Ephesians, don't provoke your children. But anyway, so I was sort of teasing him a little bit. And it took him 2 weeks. He, in the library, sat in a different place, and she went and sat beside him. In the lecture room, he changed his position, and she sat beside him. One night at dinner time, the table was full, and I sat right beside him. I had no evil intention. And I saw her coming to the dinner room, and there was no room at the table. So I got out of my seat and went to another empty table. She sat right beside him. And I just went. So 2 weeks later, he was like, why would this beautiful young Christian girl who loves her Bible even be thinking about me? And it has a happy ending. About 2 weeks later, he went on a date, and they became official, and they got married and had some kids and a dog. And it was so cool. But the thing is, he wasn't recognizing what was going on in his life. And I think that's sometimes like us. And so we read this book of Esther. There's that question. Do you see the hand of God in your life? Do you see the hand of God in Esther's life? Now, Esther, the story reminds us that God provides for his people. Not our will, but God's will. The providence of God's hand was involved from going from the day of destruction to the day of deliverance. And many years later, after Esther, there's another deliverer that comes along. God brings another person who will take us from away from the day of destruction. His name was Jesus. And he brought us to the day of deliverance. And God, once again, through his time of being born in Bethlehem, dying on a cross for our sins, being innocent, being rejected by man, once again, the divine providence of God brings us to the day of deliverance. Romans 5:6 says this, for while we were weak, at the right time, Christ died for us, the ungodly, for the sinners, and provided us once again for deliverance. And so, do you see the hand of God in Jesus, in that ultimate redemption, deliverance? So how should we respond? I'll leave that up to you, but just a few comments from me. Let us trust in God in the good times and the not so good times. Let us be authentic in our worship when we come to sing to him, with our money, with our resources. Let us serve God. Let us see those unique opportunities that are in our life. And you've probably got heaps of them you could talk about. Let's not waste those opportunities for God. The worship team is going to come forward now, and we're going to respond to God in worship with a song. I think the song is Be Thou Vision, which is a great song to respond to God. And so I want to encourage you this week to look into your own life, look into the story as we go through it, and see the you guys can come up here. I'll get AUA. See the providence of God and respond.
Nope. Yep. Just as Hayden said, it's important for us to be fixing our eyes on what God is doing in our lives and what God has planned for us. So that's why we've picked